you look at the NBA, you talked about how a lot of people are jumping to conclusions. It's only been over a week, folks. Let's pump the brakes, okay? People are jumping to a lot of conclusions. But one of the things you are seeing, and I heard you talk about this with our friend Jenna Limoncelli on the Seven Footers podcast, we're seeing young players show out, getting off to fast starts, really doing their thing. I know you've seen that. Why has that been so impressive to you thus far? And why does that matter in the grand scheme of looking at this NBA season as it just started?
Well, one of the things that happens, Dexter, is that times change and things evolve, right? Just because someone was always the best person or the best player in the league doesn't mean that always continues, right? Like things happen, things change. We talk about, a lot of basketball being played over the last calendar year. Young guys are really stepping up because fresh legs tend to recover better, right? So we're seeing a lot of young kids show out. I think you're also seeing a situation where this is a hyper competitive alpha male environment, right? And I believe that there are players who are like, look, man, like there's a chance. I see that I can go ahead and snatch that top spot, right? I can go out and make a name for myself. And we saw Trae Young do it in the playoffs last season, taking the Hawks all over the conference finals. We're seeing a lot of younger players really step out. I mean, Anthony Edwards having a great start to the season, had a great rookie year. John Morant, of course, leading the Grizzlies. We are seeing fantastic ball by the young guys, and I think that'll continue.
Yeah, I think that will continue. You mentioned John Morant. Woo! He's been killing it, and he looks really confident. It's like he looks like his game has gone from here to here. He's really made that jump, and so that's going to be interesting to see how these young guys keeping him up. But then the league is not just full of young guys, Jarod. We got some older players, some old heads up in here. What have you been seeing from the old heads? Is there anything that is concerning with some of the play we've seen from older players, particularly on the other side of 30?
Well, it's like I said before, right? So we're talking in the last 12 years, when the last calendar month, Dexter, we have played parts of 3 NBA seasons. 3 in a 12-month span. That is insanity. And again, the older you are, the more miles you have on that body, it's harder to recover, right? I mean, we don't have to look further than LeBron James, right? Since he's gotten to the Lakers, and this is year 4, I believe, he has been injured every season. I mean, when he was at Cleveland and Miami, the dude was an Iron Man. Well, 36, 30, this is what happens now, right? Like, and we know the biggest predictor of future injury is previous injury. That's just how bodies work. And yes, I know he spends $1 million on his body, all that, yada, yada, yada. The one thing that money cannot do is stop time. You can slow it, sure, but stop it, no. And that's just where we're at. So we've seen a lot of older players struggling.
Well, we've seen that, and you know what's going to come with LeBron. Some people are going to see this, and they're going to say, "Oh, Jarod is calling him the Washington."
And I never, I didn't use the word. Well, all of a sudden, right? The propaganda's going to start.
Yeah. Beside LeBron, have you seen? Because one of the things I think when you look at LeBron, and I don't want to get this statistic wrong, Jarod, but one of the things you're seeing, other than injury, is he's not having the same blow by rate past defenders that he used to have, right? And then for guys, we talk about injury. I think another guy, and you spoke about this on your podcast, I thought it was a great point. James Harden's another guy who's coming off the hamstring injury that hampered him and held him out of much of the playoffs last year. He also is not having that same explosiveness that we have seen in the past before. And I would think you would say for a guy like him, he's also played a lot of games in the last 3 to 4 years. Do you think, with a guy around his age, he's not as old as LeBron, do you think he can get it right as the Nets try to work their way through this season, especially without Kyrie Irving?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Dex. Yes, James Harden said after the Nets home opener against the Hornets on Sunday, he said, I got to get my confidence back. When was the last time you heard James Harden talk about a lack of confidence? Never, right? But here is the thing. The hamstring was the first major injury he's had in his career. So yeah, you're going to feel that. And we know, and this is not a secret, I'm not speaking out of turn, James Harden is not exactly what we would call an off-season workout warrior, right?
No.
Like that ain't really what he does. He's not in the gym, staying in peak physical shape. He likes to enjoy life and enjoy being James Harden, as well he should. But we all know this, Dex. When we were in our 20s, there were things that we could do physically You go out, you drink 2, 3 nights in a row, you're all good. You do that now into your late 30s, early 40s, body don't react the same way. As the kids say, it hit different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I felt the effects of that a few weeks ago. I got reminded real quick, like you could not do what you used to do. But Gerard, I also want to bring this up because you brought up the scheduling, right? How there's been parts of 3 seasons played within the last calendar year. Undoubtedly, we've seen that. But then I think when you think about that, and we take it to the first thing we talked about, which were younger players getting off to these good start, those young legs, teams that might be a little fresher, air quotes,
Mm,
shall I
hmm
say, does this benefit teams like that? And do you see a team that sort of is primed to make a good run up the standings, look really strong because they haven't played that many games in that way in the last year, calendar year?
I love that you brought that up. I mean, look no further than the Golden State Warriors, right?
Mm,
So they went to the finals in 2018, lost to the Toronto Raptors, right?
yep,
Okay, that's the Kevin Durant Achilles injury, Clay gets hurt, etc. What happens the next season? Steph breaks his wrist, right?
yep.
He don't essentially play the whole season. That we have the COVID break, they don't go to the bubble. They had a long break, right? Next season, they didn't make the playoffs, right? Another lengthy off season, right? This is a team that went to 5 straight finals and then essentially had 2 seasons off, right? I mean, 2 off seasons off. Notice who's playing well as an older guy? Steph Curry. Why?
Mm.
Man, he had a nice time to relax and rest and recover and get strong, right? I mean, you look at him now, he is looking his best physically. Super strong, quick, fast. And again, had he played deep into the playoffs all of those 7 straight seasons, no way he's looking like that right now. Like those 2 years really helps. And you get the infusion of the young guys with Draymond, all that stuff. I think that's a team that, we're going to see some things. I mean, again, it's early. Let's not lose our minds. But that sort of advantage of having those 2 seasons where they did not advance or make it to the playoffs, big for them, particularly coming off of that 5-year run.
That's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on as we move forward with the Warriors. I think that's a great team to look at with some of the time off that they had in the last 2 seasons, condensed seasons as they
Hmm.
may be, but the last 2 seasons. Um, Here's another observation for me that I've seen. I don't know about you, but watching the games thus far in this early season, and a small sample size, folks, the officiating, we know the rule changes they've had. They got a lot of the whackness, shall I say, out the game, the jumping into players, the hunting for fouls with the offensive player, and I supported those rule changes. But it also looks like the game has been flowing a little bit better. Have you seen that as well too? Do you think that's because of the officiating? Do you think that's because we actually got a bit more of a break between last season and this season as opposed to the 2 seasons before that? What do you think that why that is in terms of the better flow that I'm seeing to this NBA product?
I think it's a little bit of everything, Dexter. Yes, I mean Owen Phillips, who does the F5 report, and a bunch of other statisticians who cover the league have shown free throws are in fact down. Again, small sample size, but still they are down at this point in the season compared to where it was last year. And we are seeing the refs allow players to play through more. You mentioned James Harden earlier. As his coach Steve Nash said, has become the kind of poster boy for this movement. And I push back on that narrative from the standpoint of what they're talking about. The issue that Harden's having isn't the jumping into people fouls, right? That's not his game. He doesn't jump into people for fouls. Where he draws fouls are his drives to the rim and initiating contact. That is what they are not calling, and calling far less than they have in the past. And they're allowing them to play on. And so when they're doing that, players now go, ooh, I know how to guard him, because if he's leading and holding the ball out with his arms and causing me to hit him, they're not calling that foul. Great, right? And that's a big part of his game. So I think they're allowing that contact at the rim to happen. And it's also early in the season, Dex, right? So the refs are kind of getting used to how they want to call it and what they want to happen. I think we'll start seeing some things like start to not like go back to what it was, but we'll start to see some kind of like norming out of how they're calling these things.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this better flow to the game, less free throws, less stoppage. There hasn't been too many ridiculously long coaches challenges that I've
Hmm.
seen
Hmm.
thus far this season. But again, we're talking about small sample size theater here, folks. Most teams have played 4 games, some have played 3.
Right.
So, let's not go too crazy. Okay, speaking of not going too crazy, People look at the league. People have been making all kinds of stuff. This team looks great. This team concerns me. And it's fine. I'm not shaming anybody. You should have some concerns. You might have your eyes open to some things. Jarod said he's got his eyes open on some young players. That's fine. Let's start with the concerns. Are there any teams you're looking at through the first 3 or 4 games where you're like, I don't know about this. This doesn't really look too good. This might be problematic. Who are those teams for you, Gerard?
I mean, look, the Lakers are at the top of the list mainly because they're old, right? Like this is what I talked about. The games that matter for the Lakers start in April. But in order to get to April, those guys have got to be healthy. Well, Talon Horton Tucker's already got ligament issues in his thumbs, right? Like you Anthony Davis got hurt last game, I believe. I mean, he played, but like, led the league in trips to the locker room, as we always say about AD. So they concern me. Their wins, right? That win against Memphis, I mean, that came down to the wire. I mean, we talked about Memphis, and Memphis is an excellent team, right? We saw the Warriors beat them. Yeah, they won last night in San Antonio. AD came up huge, but San Antonio's kind of a middling team, right? And they played well. The Spurs did against the Lakers. Russ had a good game last night. Not starting up the season great. He always says I start slow, but yeah, dude. But it's one thing if you're 25 and you start slow. You're in your 30s and starting slow, right? Like, I think that's the reality of this stuff with everybody. I'm not saying anybody's washed. It's just a matter of, look, man, what you used to be able to do when you're like, I got time, I can figure it out. Maybe, but maybe your mind wants to do something, but your body's not physically able of doing it. So they're a team that I'm watching that's somewhat concerning. I'm not as concerned about Brooklyn only because they look like a team who they're still in preseason mode. Durant's the only player that looks like he's ready to play regular season. Everybody else is kind of like, oh, season start yet, right? So I think they'll be fine. Denver, they had the Nikola Jokic injury yesterday's game. I don't know how severe that is yet. I haven't checked in with anybody or looked into that yet. Michael Porter Jr. off to a bit of a slow start, so that's somewhat concerning because, with no Jamal Murray, he's their number 2 scoring option. So that's something I'm watching. Portland, I mean, look, Dame did his whole thing about, no, I'm staying, I'm giving Chauncey a chance, and that's cool. I'm not knocking Dame for that. The reality of it is that Dame realized he didn't want to be a bad guy in the way that James Harden was last year and Ben Simmons is currently now. How is that roster any better than the roster that lost last year? I don't see it. And he's not shooting well himself from 3. So that's an issue. So there's some teams that I'm just kind of like, all right, keeping my eyes open.
Yep. I'm with you on the Trailblazers. We'll get to that a little bit later. I will talk about them for some of the concerns and reasons you had. Okay. Those are the worrisome teams, the teams you're concerned about. Are there any teams that you are impressed by, excited to buy? Maybe it's like some people, which I don't buy, the Chicago Bulls, but some people are excited about that team. Who excites you, Gerard? Who are you high on?
I already gave you the Warriors. They're playing well. Everyone's talking about the Hornets. The Hornets are great. Lost that game in OT to the Celtics. Celtics is also a team that I'm kind of like, kind of still thinking about them. But listen, man, let's go right to New York City. Your New York Knicks, man. Look at that undefeated Kraken out here in these streets.
Not undefeated, but 3-1. We'll
3-1.
3-1. Yes, yes. We'll find.
They did lose that second game to Orlando, which is kind of like, all right, man, what y'all doing?
Yeah, but they bounced back, which I talked about at the top of the show. They bounced back. I think you should be impressed. Greg was on here saying that he's more impressed by the Knicks 3-1 start than he was by the Bulls 4-0 start because the Bulls haven't really played anybody.
Well, yes, the Bulls did play the Pistons twice. And Cade wasn't in at least one of those games. So
neither of those.
Both of them. Yeah, so but they got a new roster and they're going all in. Look, what does Bill Parcells always say? Cross-sport analogy, but you are what your record says you are, right? Like they played who they played and they beat who they played. All right, like Bulls fans, be happy. My concern with them is depth. I just after their front 6. Who's really coming off that bench for that team? Zach LaVine also has a ligament issue that he's playing through right now that Shams Charania just reported. That's concerning.
Yep.
So, there are a couple things that I'm just kind of like keeping my eyes open. But look, kudos to the Bulls playing well. And like I said, the Hornets love what I'm seeing out of them.
Look at this, folks. It's amazing. Jarod didn't pick any of these teams to go to the championship. You can have Nuance. He's not riding that high. Oh, man, the Bulls are going to take it. You know,
Chill.
first foreign All Star since '96, '97. Oh man, you don't have to do this. We don't have to do this. Okay. See, we talked about this with Nuance.
Nuance,
No hot
baby.
takes. Brought you some interesting things to chew on.